his field. Next one. But this is a photograph that was taken in Ontario, but this is an indication of what this piece of land used to look like in 1850. It was a huge marsh, and probably everybody who went through the Ohio schools learned that it was called the Great Black Swamp. It occupies a swath of land, or occupied, that was 100 miles long and 50 miles wide, and created a diagonal shape going from Sandusky area to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And some people were basically who had immigrated and had tried to move onto this land were dying of malaria because the mosquitoes were so bad. And they couldn't plant, obviously, in something like this. Next. These are some of the beautiful marshes that are still preserved in our state, but it gives you an indication of what a really effective marsh is like. And I think of it as being a giant sponge. So this sponge, you know, before it was changed, was, I think it's like 2,500 square miles large. Oh, some friends of mine have arrived. Hi, Judith. Anyway, when a change is this drastic, it has, you know, ramifications that are overwhelming. And some people came from the Low Countries of Europe. They were part of the immigration that came here. And they had ways of draining swamps or draining their land because they were right at the edge of the sea level. And so they established ceramic factories that produced pipes that were about this size, and they linked together and they carried the water off the land. And that's what created this rich farmland that was in the western part of the state. But over time, it can't absorb water well at all. And when there are huge rains, a lot of the water just goes directly into the tributaries of the Maumee River. And this is a picture of essentially downtown Toledo is over here. This is where there are all sorts of storage areas for grain. I don't know how many of you know Toledo very well, but in the top up there you see a set of trees that are in the middle of the river. That used to be the edge of the river, obviously. I mean, the river has flooded banks. It's very close to going over some of the bridges. It took out, you know, some of the infrastructure, obviously, on the edge of the river. Could I have the next, please? But as it carried silt and fertilizer and probably manure from the CAFOs, there are 770 cattle, intensive cattle and pig farms that when big rains come, their manure goes into the tributaries and into the lake. And guess what? We have problems in the lake as a result. And you can see the river coming in this way. I wasn't aware that there was such a huge refinery in, this is close to the lake. It's outside of the city limits of Toledo. This is a monster. Could we have the next picture? And this is to the right of the last picture, and you can see how the lake color has changed as it's this flooding of whatever the flood is carrying is going into the lake. And that's precisely why how the algae growth starts. There are some more complex things about zebra mussels, and they eat algae, but they hate microcystine, and there are so many of them that they won't eat it, they spit it out, and so the amount of microcystine algae is increasing because they're eating the healthier algae, things like that. But this is a huge problem for our state and for the whole lake, but particularly for us, because we're kind of where it starts. Next. So the state and the country have done some things that are really good. One is that there's a national wildlife refuge that's along the lake that is huge. And how many of you have been over to McGee or Maggie Marsh? A lot of you. I think there are thousands of birds that come across the lake during the migration, and also thousands of photographers who follow them. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to see. And there's a similar next protected wetland across the lake called Point Pelee. And again, it has a tremendous following during these spring periods and fall when all the birds are migrating. This was an early morning photograph. I got into the gate of this refuge just when the gate was opening. And so it's that early morning light, and they have a path through the wetlands like we have at Maggie Marsh. And it was a beautiful moment. And when people at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History saw this photograph, they said, wow, they must be constantly weeding this because there are no weeds. You know, it's all good grass. And they've had trouble with Mentor Marsh having to rip out some of the invasives that come in. Next. So one of the things that I wanted to look at is the kind of energy profile that is going on around the lake. I mean, and it's clear that some of the states are doing more with renewable energy than others. I would say that Ohio and Michigan, at least along the lake, are behind the other entities that are around the lake, which is, of course, Ontario and a portion of New York and a portion of Pennsylvania. But this is a coal-burning power plant just pretty much north of north of the city of Toledo. And could I have the next? This is quite a dramatic limestone mine that's on the way up to Detroit. And a friend of mine worked for 20 years in the town that's next to this mine, and she wasn't aware of it. People only know about it if they're in an airplane. And probably this limestone is used for making concrete. And to make concrete, it has to be heated really highly. So it's considered to be one of the building materials that takes a lot of energy to produce. And that's true of glass as well, and